glad to see all the faces here tonight. This is great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight. We appreciate it as you come out to hear the candidates in Iowa House District 51 and Senate District 26. We'll be hearing from them all tonight. These are very important these forums and chances for the candidates to come out and meet the public are very important because, you know, in the news, I'm from KIMT, Matt Bradley, by the way, I'm your moderator tonight. Thank you to the Osage Chamber of Commerce for inviting me out here to take part, and thank you to all of the candidates for coming out. And what I was trying to say there was that in the news we can try to sum up what the candidates' positions are, but it's best when you can hear it from them firsthand and hear their true feelings on the issues. And we know that these issues are going to matter to everybody in this room because they're from you. We're asking the questions that you submitted. So we're going to get to it tonight. Here's how everything will work. We used a deck of cards to randomly determine who would be speaking first, and we are going to start with the House race, District 51. And the candidates will each have 3 minutes for opening statements, and then they will each answer the same question. I'll ask one question, they'll each have a chance to answer it. It'll be 3 minutes per side, and the person who answered the question first will get 1 minute for rebuttal if they choose to take it. I'm planning candidates to only ask this question, each question once. If you'd like me to repeat it, that's just fine. I'm happy to do that. And then at the end of 10 questions, we'll have a 2-minute closing statement. And we drew cards and have determined that the Republican Josh Burns will be speaking first, and his Democratic challenger, Eric Hungerford, will be taking the first question. So we'll start the timer as soon as I sit down, and we'll hear from Mr. Burns.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Wendy and the Chamber for organizing this tonight. You know, I think it is exactly what was just said. It's valuable that the people, the public, get to hear the candidates. Sometimes, you know, you just get little sound bites on TV, radio, newspapers, things like that. So I really appreciate the fact that they organized this. I appreciate the fact that we have an amazing crowd here tonight. I'm very impressed with that. So it means that people are interested, people are vested in their futures. They want to know what these candidates have to offer them. My name is Josh Burns. I currently serve as the state representative for House District 14. Because of redistricting, we're now calling it House District 51, and we're taking out Floyd County and parts of Saragordo County, and we're putting in Worth County, and we're putting in Winneshiek and Howard. So I retain Mitchell County here. A little bit about myself. I'm a Riceville native. I graduated from Riceville High School in '92. Went on to Luther College, graduated in '96, was a biology major. Went on to teach high school science. I see a guy back there in the green with a shirt on that I recognize as a former student, so I'm glad to see him here tonight. And so then from there, we went on to teach high school science here in Osage. Taught here for 5 years. Went to Mason City High School, taught there for a couple of years. And then we kind of jumped ship and went out to Nyack and tried post-secondary education, and then that's where I am today. So education is my thing. We have a master's degree from Winona State in educational leadership, and we're working on a degree at Iowa State right now to kind of put an end to going to college. And so in the future, we have some aspirations of staying in that post-secondary level. I have, and I don't see my wife here yet. I know she was taking care of some kid issues before we left. But I live here in Mitchell County. My wife just accepted a position at the Mitchell County Regional Hospital. She's going to be in family practice there. We have 3 kids that go to school here in Mitchell County. We've got a 15-year-old daughter. I got a freshman, so that should get your sympathy alone. I've also got a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old. So, you know, I'm vested. I have a true interest in making sure that the state of Iowa, that where I found it as a beginning legislator is better when I leave. I want to make sure that I create a good future for my children. So those are kind of my background a little bit. I wish my wife was here because I wanted to put a shout out to her because she puts up with a lot. Anytime you go through these campaigns and these elections, it is tough on the spouse and it's tough on the family, and I really appreciate their commitment to stand by me. Currently in the House of Representatives, I serve as the vice chair of Ways and Means. I serve on economic growth, I serve on environmental protection, and then I'm also on pretty much every education committee you can think of based on my background. So look forward to talking with you guys tonight.
A big thanks again to Wendy. Appreciate everything happening tonight. You put everything together very well, and I think everyone here can appreciate that. And Matt, thanks for coming out to moderate. It's great to see this many folks out here tonight. It's my second time in this building. It's a beautiful building. It's a great county. It's a good place to be, and I really do believe that. My name's Eric Hungerford. I grew up in Manly, Iowa. Lived my entire life here in Iowa. Did live a few years in Iowa City and Waverly when I was going to school there. Graduated from Manly in 2001. I went to Wartburg College for a couple of years, 2.5 years, and then I went to Kirkwood for a couple of years after that, studying philosophy, electronic media, and political science as well, a little bit there. I don't have a 4-year degree right now, and that's not good enough for me. I am planning on pursuing a degree, most likely in law at this point. But for the most part, you know, a lot of Iowans don't have 4-year degrees. In fact, I'm in the majority here. And on top of that, I think the job market in this state is wonderful. We know that a lot of states are struggling a lot more than we are right now. Our unemployment rate is fairly low, but we also know that our underemployment rate is a very real thing too. We know that a lot of folks out there with or without a 4-year degree are struggling to get by, working paycheck to paycheck jobs, and a lot of people are living at home or in places where they feel it's inadequate for their living situation. And I think that's unfortunate in a place like North Iowa where there are a lot of good folks. I see a lot of people out there taking care of their own, and I think that's important. But I know that there are a lot of things we can do better. My plan to do that is going to be to invest in education, and Josh is a wonderful guy. He's had a lot of experience in the education realm, and I know that he has stood up for some very important things when it comes to education in the state. However, I see the whole problem, the budgetary problem, of us not looking to get back to where we were a couple of years ago. And I know you can't just throw money at a problem, but education is the kind of thing that you need to really invest in and make some tough choices to make better. And for what it's worth, you know, we need to get back to the levels we were at. We need to have teachers employed all across this state in small towns. I know schools are struggling in a lot of places because of the number of students that are attending currently, but a lot of schools are still doing very well, even with the rural environment, and I think that's important to support in a lot of ways. I think the budget needs to increase for those schools because as we strive to be a better society and a better Iowa, we're going to have to make some serious improvements. When I was a kid, we were in the top 5 consistently in education. We're not there today. And I think on the current path right now, I'm not sure we're going to be there. What I'm concerned about right now, I'm concerned about what we're going to do for schools. I think there are a lot of good ideas out there, and I think there are a few poor ones. I think for what it's worth, good is never good enough. And we're going to have to make tough choices to make our state better, not just in education, but across the board. We need to improve for the future because we can always do better.
The question is, please explain your ideas for education reform, and also, do you support Governor Branstad's education plan?
Sure. I've taken some time to look into that. There's a lot more that I need to understand better. And of course, not being an educator leaves me at a little bit of a disadvantage in some ways as to not having the actual experience myself. But having spoken to a lot of folks who have been in education around in big cities and in small towns in Iowa, I think for what it's worth, we definitely need to look at ways to improve how we're holding students accountable and teachers accountable. But I think that we need to look at ways to do that positively. One of the things that has been proposed is a standardized test for 3rd graders to make sure that our students have met a certain level of understanding. And I think, you know, there's a lot of science and a lot of good experience out there that shows us that standardized testing can do a lot for students, but it also can be a detriment. Because when we spend a lot of time learning for a standardized test, you know, that is just scientifically you know, we know that that doesn't actually provide the knowledge for the future in a lot of ways too. That children are actually going to retain and take beyond that test more than a couple of weeks in most cases. So I think that we need to, like I say, do positive things. I don't think that we should penalize students and hold them back in 3rd grade. I think we should look into certain options like there are systems out there that track every student's individual accomplishment, every student's individual level. They're online-based systems oftentimes, secure networks and that allow the teachers to see where the student has learned and not learned. And that's important because every school and every student is different. And we know that we can't necessarily take an across-the-board approach. So when we talk about educating students better and improving our education system, one size fits all isn't going to work, but I think in particular we need to shy away from ideas like standardized tests for children in the 3rd grade, especially. I think that's unfortunately not going to get us to where we want to be. And there's a lot of other ways that we can look to do that. I think science again, and what we know to be proven to work is that things like year-round school tend to be effective. Increasing the number of days, increasing the amount of days in a year, spreading the days out, all these kinds of things are all effective. So those are the kind of things that I'll be focusing on when it comes to education. But that's exactly where we need to be headed right now when it comes to education reform.
Well, you know, we live this. This is what I do, and so, you know, part of what I've, you know, kind of gotten into in Des Moines, you know, they recognize the fact that I am an educator. The governor appointed me to his governor's STEM Advisory Council, which is Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. We just got reappointed to that through the year 2015. The state of Iowa has appointed me to what's called the Educational Commission of the States, which is a national commission of leaders from across the United States. I attend those meetings on behalf of Iowa. It's a bipartisan organization. It's sponsored by Bill and Melinda Gates, and so there is no taxpayer dollars that sends me to go to these trips. But part of that is when I'm going to these meetings, it's a chance for me to pick up new ideas. It's a chance for me to gather information on things that are working across this United States. In terms of the question of do I support the governor's education reform plan, yes and no. You know, I had a discussion prior to this debate about you need to not vote with your caucus all the time. I don't vote with my caucus all the time, and I would probably be willing to tell you that most of my no votes against my caucus came from the governor's education reform plan. I did not agree with him on the preschool issue. I did not agree with him on some of these issues at the 3rd grade level. I also didn't agree with the fact that, to me, the education reform plan really didn't hit enough of the rural education aspect. And because of that lack of maybe hitting that rural education aspect, this summer I developed what I'm calling a rural education task force. And what this rural education task force is composed of is legislators from both sides of the aisle. This is senators, state representatives, Director Jason Glass, who's in charge of the Department of Education. We have a superintendent, we have a school board member, we have administrators. We have all sorts of folks on this. Lieutenant Governor Reynolds is on this. The purpose of this is to try to explore solutions, something that we can do policy-wise that can help our rural school districts. We can't lose our rural school districts. I mean, if I have folks out here in the crowd and you have a business or a company, are you ever going to move your business to Riceville if they don't have a school district? Absolutely not. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start to create these economic dead zones across our state. We can't do that. And so for me, this next legislative session, a lot of what I'm championing is to stick up for rural America, to stick up for our rural education system. You know, I would say probably the biggest thing that I agree with on the governor's education reform piece is that we're talking about education. I may not agree with everything that he's got on the table, but at least we're talking about it. We created we now have 6 regions, 6 STEM regions across the state of Iowa, and we just recently hired 6 directors of each one of those STEM hubs. The purpose is to help us as a state get organized so that we can increase the amount of science, technology, engineering, and math that's going on in the state of Iowa. So, no, I don't agree with everything that he's done. He's not an educator, but at least we're talking about it. I could go on all day.
And thank you. You have a minute for rebuttal.
I definitely do appreciate some of the votes that you've taken, Josh. I know that it's not always easy to go against your caucus to do things like that. It seems like ultimately what it comes down to is that it sounds to me that you disagree with a lot of the plan there. And unfortunately, because of the leadership in the House right now and the way things have been going, we're probably going to see more of the same. So, you know, I really appreciate your leadership, and, you know, if you are elected again, I would love to see that happen. You know, I just think that for what it's worth, we can definitely look at different ways to do it, and I think that we need different leadership in order to have that change.
Thank you. Question 2 is, what would you do to help small business in an increasingly troublesome economy?
Mine is back, correct? Okay.
Yes.
Well, you know, as I serve on as Vice Chair of Ways and Means, You know, one of the things that I've really got to learn in the last 2 years are things that deal with taxes, specifically property taxes. You know, they took an educator and they put me in this vice chair position for Ways and Means, and I definitely went in there kind of a deer in headlights, which I think anybody would do as they go into the state legislature. There is no book that tells you how to do this job. But I've had really, really good people. I've had a lot of people that have taken the time to teach me. I've learned an enormous amount. And I know that for small businesses, you know, where we rank as a state, it's killing them when we start talking about property taxes. And over the last 2 years, we as a House have tried to pass some sort of a property tax reform bill. We've passed out 4 different versions of this. This would help small local businesses. I have a business here in Osage. I won't use their name, I won't use their dollar amounts, but they specifically told me if we could have some sort of property tax relief, we would hire another person. They would add a job, and we cannot get that done. We rank towards the bottom. When you start looking at all the states across this country, we rank towards the bottom when it comes to our property tax setup. That's not business friendly. We've got to change that. So we have taken and passed 4 different bills over to the Senate. We've tried to accommodate some of their needs, some of their wants, and at the end of the day, we still have nothing. So, you know, for me, I would say at the forefront for these small businesses, you know, we got to do something to reform this property or this tax structure. It's just, it's killing the small business person. You know, and the other thing is it's a workforce. You know, some of these businesses want to add people to their workforce. Today I spent about an hour with the workforce development folks here and actually in Mason City, and they're telling me these companies cannot find good workers. They can't find people that want to show up. They can't find people that go to work every day. They can't find people that communicate. There are no soft skills. And it's very frustrating because we got a lot of companies that want to grow, they want to get bigger, they want to live the dream. They can't find the workers to do it. And so, you know, I think that's kind of where, you know, with my job at NIAC, that's kind of where we kind of come in is to help train those people, to help get those people a skill set to make them marketable so we can help grow these small businesses. And probably one of the things that I'm known for the most in Des Moines, which makes sense, is we've been pretty vocal on funding for the community colleges. I see the community college as being just a cornerstone in economic development in the state. We can react on a dime. We do a lot of jobs training, and I think that whole community college infrastructure also helps with growing these small businesses.
Well, Iowa businesses do have a lot to benefit from changes in the tax code potentially. But I also think that one of the points that was brought up just here, the fact that there are very few individuals in a lot of cases, or not enough, to match the job with soft skills and any kind of skills, really just basic ability to do the job, to match the needs of employers. I think there's a reason for that. I think if we look at recent graduates over the last maybe 5 or 6 years, I think that our school system has been declining enough to the point where there are a lot of folks out there who graduate without actually having the skills and the knowledge to go forward and to fill these positions. And I think obviously when it comes to small business, matching your people to your business is important. So we need to do 2 things. We need to look at the people who are out there right now when it comes to getting the people to work. We need to look at the folks who are coming up also through the education system. We need to help both of those groups of individuals. I'd be a little concerned about dropping tax rates in a lot of cases, and that's because the state of Iowa is doing phenomenally well compared to other states, as I said. And of course, creating 1 job or 5 jobs or 10 jobs is nothing to sneeze at. However, we make choices to invest in our future so that we can have the people who are willing and able to fill those positions 5 or 10 years down the road. And as long as we keep slipping on education, especially in a global setting, we're not going to be competitive as much as we once were. And it's nice to believe that we can keep ourselves in a self-contained little area where, you know, folks in North Iowa can support themselves and we can all just be in our own little bubble. But we are competing globally now. And I think that that's going to take a certain amount of investment to keep that level high and then get higher with, in regards to our ability to compete in the global marketplace. So I would say right now that the tax structure We could look at making some changes, but I think a lot of the proposed changes go too far or just don't really hit the mark because they take away from a lot of what we could possibly invest in, for example, getting schools back up to the levels they were at 2 years ago so that we can have programs that are expanding and not declining.
Just so folks know, as of July 1st, when it comes to state business climate, the State Business Climate Index, Iowa ranks 41st out of 50. That is not a good ranking. We don't want to be 41st out of 50. The other thing is, and I'm glad that, that Mr. Hungerford brought this up, the revenue surplus we have in the state of Iowa. We did not have that prior to the 84th General Assembly starting. Okay? That did not exist. We now have a surplus in the state of Iowa because we are not spending more money than we take in. And right now we have our reserves full at $600 million. We got another $300 million on top of that, and the latest revenue estimating committee is suggesting we may have another $300 million on top of that. Why is this important? We don't know what's going to happen at a federal level. We are going to see some issues with Medicaid, where we're going to have to pick up the bill. We're going to see some federal funding potentially cut for education. Our state's going to have to pick up the bill. There's folks out there that want to spend the reserves. We're not spending them just quite yet.
Joe constituent comes to you asking for help in changing the law. You personally agree with the current law. So what do? Do you determine how the majority of constituents feel?
Well, you know, serving means that you care about what's happening out there with folks. But it also means that you take a big picture look and try to really understand what the change in the law is going to be and what it's going to affect for everyone, not just the person who asked you for that change. Because we can all bend over backwards for our neighbors and our friends as much as possible, you know, if the only thing that's at stake is a little bit of our time and energy. But if we're going to be making cuts in a program, let's say, for example, or we're going to be causing problems down the road for the state as a whole, then, you know, we can't do that. And you can't please everyone. You definitely have to pick and choose what you actually support when it comes to making our future stronger. So I think that it's nice to be good to people's faces, and in North Iowa here, we are really friendly to each other's faces. But you know, that doesn't mean that we always agree, and we shouldn't always agree because there are plenty of reasons for us to have different outlooks, and so you know, it really depends on what it is that they're asking of you. But I think ultimately we need to do what's best for the entire state, and that's unfortunately not going to make everyone happy.
Well, you know, we've lived it. We've done it. There are moments, and that's probably what makes this job the hardest and most difficult, is that, you know, no matter what, at the end of the day, you're going to have constituents that don't agree with every one of your votes. And I think the best thing that you can do is you simply have to listen to folks. You know, I've got folks sitting out here in the crowd tonight that they weren't my supporter in 2010. They didn't vote for me. But you know what? When they email me, when they contact me, I still talk to them. You know, we don't always agree on everything, but we agree to disagree. But I think the most important piece to that is you at least have to listen to it. You have to listen to the argument. You know, you know what? There's been a few cases. There's probably some of my votes that I took in probably 2010 session that I might reverse today. You know, having visited with some people, maybe got educated on a few more things. You know, that's part of the game, but you're not always going to agree all the time. But I think you owe it to your constituents to show them that respect, to at least take the time to listen to their concerns. And then I think it's important that you also respect them by giving them an answer of why you feel the way you do, and then listening to why they feel the way that they do.
I'm going to step out of bounds here for a moment and ask, is there anything, can you think of a particular thing that you would have changed from 2010? Just one minute.
Yeah, you know, there were some votes I took with property tax issues that maybe looking back on it, I would change my vote a little bit on some of those.
Forgive me for that. Thank you.
I don't think that we really would differ on this for the most part from what we're saying. You know, you live and you learn, that makes perfect sense too, and you obviously want to take people's thoughts and you know, real livelihoods into consideration whenever you make any tough decision. But like I said, if you're going to end up being a detriment to the state as a whole, that's where I would draw the line. So, you know, it's important to listen to folks, but we also need to be sure, to be absolutely sure that the decisions we're making are going to be the best, in the best interest of everyone.
Next question is for Josh Burns, and this actually was written to you here on the card. It says, what do you think about gay marriage, and how did you vote on it?
Very good question. My vote on same-sex marriage, what the vote was, just so you folks out there know, the vote was, would you allow folks to take a vote on same-sex marriage? I voted in favor of allowing people to take that vote. You know, I'm a little bit more of what I would call the moderate Republican, and I don't campaign on the social issues. And I take a different approach to this, and I've actually had some communication with some of the folks on the LGBT side, and I've said, you know, if we take a vote, at least everybody knows where we're at, you know, and I guess that's kind of my approach to it. But I'll be honest with you, and I had a quote in the paper, in the Waterloo Courier this summer, that quite simply came out against the Republican leader, A.J. Spiker, because he's calling for us to vote out these judges, and that frustrates me, because I don't think that's where the focus should be for my party. I want my party to create jobs. I want us to take care of a lot of these economic issues that we have. You know, my focus is on education. And so I'll be honest with you, you know, that is not something that I'm campaigning on. That is not an issue that's at the forefront for me, and I know that I've got supporters out there that think opposite of that, and that's one of those issues that we simply have to agree to disagree on this.
Fair amount of respect for anyone who's willing to go against what the folks around them want them to do, just because, you know, it's not as convenient, obviously, to anger folks on something like that. I think that was absolutely correct, that when Mr. Burns said that we do not need to be focusing on social issues in a lot of these cases. I think, you know, freedom and decency are things that are already written into our Constitution. Zach Wall said it very well when he said that he was raised by two gay women and he turned out just fine. So I think, you know, I'm definitely interested in supporting same-sex marriage, because I've known folks since I was a small child, when I was 13 years old perhaps, even in high school almost. I knew folks that I just had a feeling were going to turn out to be homosexual. And they were. And not all of them, of course, you know, sometimes you make a bad decision calling people, that happens. But when someone's born that way, they're born that way. And I think that we need to definitely stay out of people's lives in this regard. I think that the government has no place telling people who they are and who they're happy with, and that's something that I'm willing to stand up for and be fairly vocal about. So, you know, a lot of respect, like I say, to anyone who's willing to take a stand that's against a lot of the folks that they work with, as Mr. Burns has done on this. I don't think we should push it too hard, because I think that if we want this issue to go away, all we have to do is stop talking about it.
I guess for me, and what people need to understand too, is I have a unique situation. I actually have a very good high school friend that he and his partner, they adopted 2 girls. They've done a wonderful job of raising those girls. So for me, on a personal level, you know, when you know somebody and you kind of see some things firsthand, it's one of those things that kind of opens your eyes up to a few things, and you know, that's not what I'm campaigning on. I'm campaigning to make this state great, and we're focused on a lot of those education and business issues.
Yeah, how do you intend to vote on the judge retention issue on the ballot, Mr. Hungerford?
Sure. I will definitely vote to retain the judges. I think that, you know, a lot of these folks, well, I know that a lot of these folks were appointed during Republican administrations. They're not political votes that these folks are taking, or the political decisions that these judges are making here. They're making decisions based on the law. They're looking at the Iowa Constitution and they're saying, this is how it reads. I think that that's pretty much a foregone conclusion, excuse me, that has been decided, and that will not come up again in the courts. Hopefully it's a decided issue, and like I say, if we want this to be over with, all we have to do is stop making an issue of it.
Well, for one, it's a pretty personal question. I'll never tell people how I vote when it comes to our elections. I will tell you this, though, in the past, regardless of this issue, I've tended to vote no just to keep the guys honest. So, you know, that's just something I've always kind of done, is just to make them think a little bit about their job, and that's gone on for years prior to any sort of controversial issues. So, but I don't know, that's how I vote in the voting booth. That's between me and the piece of paper.
I think that, you know, voting yes or no for no, you know, particular reason, I can understand shaking it up and keeping people on their feet. But it's a long process, and it takes a lot of time and energy to get these judges where they are. So, you know, that's very good that you actually want to tell us that you do that. But I think there's just no good reason to vote one way or the other unless we have a good reason.
Back to education, Mr. Burns, did you vote for allowable growth for schools? Why or why not? And how do you feel about reform?
I did not vote for the higher end of allowable growth for schools. The first year we were at 0%, second year we went to 2%. That was part of the governor's initiative for a 2-year budget plan. I'll be honest with you, I'm an educator. I've been there, we've lived it. Throwing money in education and think that you're going to increase scores, you're going to make everything better, it doesn't work. I can't even begin to tell you how much research and how many papers I've had to write and how much research I've done on this subject. The research says over and over that if you simply throw money in education, it does not increase test scores. It is not going to raise the bar. The money that you invest in education, it's got to be targeted. It's got to be specific. You have to have a plan. You have to have a vision for how you're going to make that bar higher. And, the funny thing is, we heard all this doom and gloom about, we can't survive on this, and this is never going to work, and we're going to have tons of teachers laid off. Didn't happen. And, I think that was part of we got the state back in order, fiscally speaking, and we needed to. And, we survived. The other thing is, boy, I tell you what, 0% allowable growth was still an increase in funding. And if we go back to the previous governor, and this is really what got me motivated to get into this position, boy, 0% and 2% allowable growth is a heck of a lot better than a 10% across the board cut. In the fall, after the teacher contracts have already been signed, the schools are obligated to those contracts, and now you got a group of administrators scrambling to find out how are we going to cut this 10% from our budget when we're obligated to these dollars in these teacher contracts. That's not fair to schools. And so I guess the way I look at it is the last 2 years, we have told school districts, here's what we're going to give you. We're not going to cut it. What we promise you is what we promise you. We are good on our work. And we did. And you know what? At the end of the day, the 2%, I've had superintendents since that time that have said, it worked out. It worked out. We were able to move forward. We're glad that you guys are, putting this education reform package together, because what the education reform package does is it gives us specific goals and specific targets of where to spend that money, so that we're not doing a shotgun approach to it. We're not just shooting the gun and hoping we fix education. We're specifically targeting different things. So, for example, those STEM academies that I've been talking about, those 6 STEM hubs, we're sticking money into those hubs, and we're specifically targeting those dollars so that we can help high schools increase their science, technology, and engineering and math, so we can bring up those scores. So I think that's a better approach when you have a plan.
That's fairly well said. Most definitely understanding that that throwing money at a problem doesn't solve it is important. But every year the programs right now, for the most part, are going up. Like anything, costs are going up. Running a school district, buses, all the basics. Costs go up every single year. So there is a certain amount that schools necessarily are struggling with that they otherwise would not have been having to find the money for. Some programs like arts and science, not sciences, but the arts in particular, definitely could be in better shape than they are. Not to say that we're struggling and that we're unable to do with what we have, but that good is never really good enough. And I think that, as I said, when I was a kid, Iowa was in the top 5 in the nation when it came to education, and that was consistent. We're not there anymore. And it's going to take some real infrastructure, and it's going to take some real changes to get there. But I think that it will ultimately cost more money than we're probably spending right now. Getting up to speed in technology, getting up to speed in how we're monitoring schools and the students is going to take a certain amount of investment. And if we don't make that investment now, we're not going to be where we need to be in 5 years. So I would say the 0% allowable growth in particular shocked me. I understand that the budget must be balanced, but I think in this regard, this is one particular case where I just don't believe that 0% allowable growth is where we should have been, and it's definitely not where we should be in the next couple of years. And of course, the across-the-board cuts being what they were, there are a lot of services, a lot of government, what they're bringing to you, like utilities and all the basics, all have been having a lot of struggles. I think schools are no different. So that's something that I would be working for to definitely improve, is to make sure that they have what they need to get to the next level.
Costs continue to rise for our school districts. We have declining enrollment, but yet we still have the same size school districts. School buses still have to travel the same amount of miles with less students. So you have increased transportation costs. One of the things that I would like to see come out of this rural education task force that I've created is ideas and solutions in which we can help with those issues. For example, in the state of Nebraska, they have what they call necessarily small school districts. They're necessarily small. There's a different funding formula for them to help those people out. The other thing that we can do, and I will make every superintendent shudder at this, is if we take a look at the PEPL dollars. Maybe we need to be able to use our PEPL money in our school districts for things like transportation costs. Right now, it's really silly because we can buy a brand new school bus out of your PEPL funds, but if you lose your motor or your transmission, you have to take it out of the general fund. Why can't we take it out of the PEPL?
Next question for Mr. Hungerford. How do you feel about livestock confinement?
Sure. Well, we know that over the last 15 or 20 years, there have been some pretty drastic changes to the way that farming and agriculture have been done in the state. And it's due in some part to necessity, in some part due to just bad situations on the part of local farmers and folks that run smaller operations. So now it's become cost inefficient to compete with hog confinements and a lot of these larger operations. So, well, I don't believe that it's going to be possible to get back to where we were, where most folks had a farm and they had their own equipment and they had their own livestock and all of this. We're not going to get back to that point. I think we really do need to take a really hard look at what we're going to do to support the local family farmer more than we have, because in the last 10 years we've lost, I believe, 50% again of the small town farming and just the number of folks that are doing this. That's a problem. That means that we're heading in one direction pretty seriously, and it's not just in the past, it's still happening today. So when it comes to hog confinements, it's a tough issue. A lot of folks are interested in the emissions and pollution and that kind of thing, which I think is important. I think we need to pay attention to how much ammonia is being released and potentially finding new ways to dispose of some of these things so that we can keep it out of our waterways. I think that's very, very important, and there are a lot of people out there who would say the same thing. But at the same time, we are competing with other states when it comes to hog operations and cattle operations of large scale, and I think we need to make sure that we do try not to penalize people if they are doing their best to keep everything environmentally in line and to be good to their community. So we do need to look at what it is we're going to do about smells potentially, and a lot of that caused by noxious fumes and that. But I think it's fair to say that, as I said, we're not going to go back to exactly where we were. We need to look at where we're going and be fair to those companies, but they also need to be fair to us. And if we pollute now, we're going to have a heck of a time cleaning up in the future. It's a lot easier and a lot more cost effective in the long term to do it right the first time. And I think that's extremely important.
It's all about balance. It's about balance. It's about, for example, myself, I have livestock. Okay, and I'm obviously small scale. My wife doesn't allow me to get any larger, but we're small scale. I'm all about things like locally grown. We raise our own chickens. We have our own beef. We have, we raise a lot of our stuff ourselves, and that's just what we choose. But I also understand there's a lot of people to feed out there, and I know that there's some folks in the audience right here. And they have some of these livestock confinement facilities, and they're of rather large scale. And you know what? We need to have them too. We need to have everybody on board. And there has to be a balance between everything. Right now, my brother-in-law, who lives over by Orchard, he currently is putting up one of these monoslope buildings. But part of the agreement for him to do this monoslope building is that he has to get rid of his open lots. And so he has signed an agreement to get some grant dollars that he will remove the open lots that are not under roof, because it's much better to have your livestock under roof where you can contain the manure, you don't have the runoff, it's a lot healthier for the animals. So, you know, find me a farmer out there that truly wants to pollute, or, you know, somebody that wants to lose their topsoil. Farmland selling at $10,000, $12,000 an acre. Why would you want to lose your topsoil? You don't want to. And I think that sometimes we really go after the farmer on some of these issues, and I have yet to find one that truly, we have some that make mistakes. There's no doubt about it. And when they do, it gets magnified. And it's unfortunate. But every industry has somebody who makes mistakes. And I really think that we're working hard on the agricultural side to be, you know, environmentally friendly. We have a lot of practices. We got a lot of technology that's being incorporated, whether we're talking about strip tillage. We have manure management plans now. You know, and I'm really excited because we have a guy by the name of Chuck Gibb. Chuck Gibb is the new director for the DNR. I have nothing but wonderful things to say about this guy, and it's not just because he's a Luther grad, but he's a guy that's been in the agricultural sector, but he also is from Decorah, where he knows that the environment is pristine, and he knows that you have to take care of things. And I see this man as a uniter, and I'm really excited about what he can do to bring the agricultural side and the environmental side together. And so I look forward to seeing the types of things and the leadership that he's going to provide for us. But, you know, we got to feed people. Hungry people present some national security issues, and, you know, we have to produce food. And part of that is this process. But I think, you know, we keep things in check, and we keep things in balance.
I think that no one really wants to punish those who are successful if they can avoid it. So that's why I talked about trying to be fair to those, and of course asking to be fair to us. And I think that we have seen a lot of simple mistakes made, and I think we've learned a lot from those. I just think that there have been a few good changes to the law when it comes to citing, and I think some of that stuff is important. And you know, really, just to reiterate, it costs a lot more to deal with the problem down the road that you've caused than it is to you know, deal with that up front with a little bit of foresight. And I think that while it's been handled fairly well around the state, there's still some things we can do to make sure that we're not allowing some of these mistakes, especially in large operations, to happen in the first place, because in many cases we do know better already.
But what are you going to do to stop abortion in Iowa?
Is that mine?
Yes, it goes to you.
Well, you know, again, it goes back to some things about legislation that, again, I'm focused on jobs, economy, education. I haven't been out there knocking on the doors talking about abortion. We do have something that's called Roe versus Wade. We have some federal level things that have occurred. You know, it's a slippery slope. You know, if I throw my religion into it, you know, obviously I have some issues and some reservations. You know, again, I'm not sure that we'll see that brought up in Des Moines this next legislative session. I can tell you this in terms of behind the scenes. We've had that issue brought up a lot even within our caucus. There is a group of folks that is one of their missions. That's their passion. I respect that. You guys know where my passion lies. And some of those things have never come to the floor for debate. But, you know, I don't know. To me, this really starts to get up to the federal level, and it's way above my pay grade.
I'm going to have to disagree a little bit with that, because I think that there's not a lot of folks out there who want to see more abortions. So what we're talking about here is, of course, where's the breakdown here, where folks are not having proper family planning and are not thinking ahead to the future. I really do believe that human beings tend to make mistakes, and I know there are increasingly large numbers in not just in Iowa, which there are a few more now than there were a few years ago, but pregnancies are happening at younger and younger ages. It's a fact. So I think if folks are not prepared to be a parent, and in many cases are just not in that position, they need to be prepared to not have children. And it sounds great to say that we should have abstinence only, which a lot of folks support. I would love to support that if it worked. But we know, like I say, people make mistakes. We're all human beings. We all are essentially creatures, and we all need to be responsible for what we end up creating. So I think the issue here is really providing people the opportunity to make the right decision. I think we can do more to support more or less frightening children into not having pregnancies due to STDs and all these different, or STIs, excuse me, and all these different terrible things that can happen to a person if they're not responsible and if they're not watching out for their best interest down the road. I really think that, because we're having pregnancies younger and we're having a lot of issues with young children getting into these things, we need to make sure that they are aware of what they're doing. And if we don't do that, we're not doing our job.
On a personal level, you don't use abortion to erase mistakes. Abortion is not a form of birth control. That, on a personal level, I struggle with. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and wasn't exactly prepared for that girl. And you know what? I can't imagine life without her. And, to think that somebody would have snuffed out that life because he made a mistake, I don't get that. And we got a lot of people out there that would love to adopt kids. And I think there's alternative solutions. I don't see where you use abortion to erase a mistake. It doesn't make sense to me.
Let's go back to the economy for this one. What would you do to ensure economic competitiveness in our state and district?
Well, to me, the core of economic competitiveness is the small guy. Because in many cases, the community that we have is based off of who we are and what we're able to do. So I think that when there are living wage jobs, and when folks are able to provide for their families and to save for the future, which a lot of folks are not able to do these days, then we're going to be better off if we can provide the environment that's going to allow for those folks to be able to succeed. So ultimately, what it means to me, and I think that across the board, folks with degrees and without degrees, in many cases, are struggling to find those living wage jobs. If we can do anything we can to support bringing wages up, that's going to make it more possible for our communities to have folks who are able to spend, are able to go out there and invest in their communities. Otherwise, we're going to have more and more folks who are living paycheck to paycheck, which I full well understand is a difficult thing to do. And when it comes down to competitiveness, like I say, in the global marketplace, we live in a very complex world. We live in a place that is changing every day. So if we don't create the kinds of jobs, if we don't look to create things like manufacturing in green technologies and things like that, which I believe we can do in North Iowa. I believe we can train people and we can bring the companies into small areas around here. There are still enough unemployed people who are basically capable enough to do those jobs. We need to find ways to promote those kinds of things so that the jobs we do create will stick around. They'll be worth something to the world economy, and so they'll be actually decent paying jobs. We'll be able to invest back into our communities. People will be able to buy homes as much as possible. There are a lot of folks that right now are in a real bad way if they try to go into a home if they're not prepared to do so. And we saw what happened when banks gave people loans for things that they couldn't pay back for houses and such. That was a real problem a few years ago, and that was a federal issue, but it definitely comes back to haunt us sometimes too. So ultimately, we need to make sure that we're actually investing in real wage jobs, real living wage jobs, because that's where we're going to be in the future if we choose to be there.
Ms. Burns.
Well, we'll go back to what I was talking about earlier with these state business climate ratings. If you take a look again, Iowa, we're 41st. We jump over to South Dakota, our good neighbor to the west, they're ranked 2nd. So now you tell me, you're living in Sioux City, you want to expand your business, you want to grow your company, where are you going to go? I'm going to where they got a better tax structure, and that's South Dakota, and it's happened. I got a very good friend that's a legislative friend. His name's Jeremy Taylor. He's from Sioux City. And he can tell me, he can tell you firsthand about the companies and the stories that they've lost from Sioux City, Iowa, that go across the border into South Dakota. Missouri, they're ranked 15th. we're 41st. Nebraska, they're not as good, but they're at least lower than us by 11 points. Illinois of all people has a ranking of 28th. You know, Governor Branstad took a lot of heat this week because we presented a very lucrative incentive plan to get a fertilizer plant into the state of Iowa. And we were competing with Illinois for this fertilizer plant. Now there's a lot of folks that were upset about the package that Governor Branstad had to put together to get that fertilizer plant into Iowa. You know what? We wouldn't have had to do that if we had some more competitiveness with our tax structure. You know, we have to do those things in order to get people to come to our state. You know, so again, it comes back to some sort of a property tax reform. We seriously need to take a look at this. You know, again, there's 4 models out there. We have 4 different plans that we can create an a la carte system, and we can pick and choose those pieces. I just need to see the Senate come on board with us and help us out with this. And we're not there yet. So, you know, I take a look at these rankings. It's sad, you know, and it's sad because I know firsthand the quality of workers that we have in the state of Iowa. People don't shy away from our state because we don't have good work ethic. They shy away from our state because we don't have a good incentive package. We're not competitive with the neighboring states, and we need to become more competitive.
Just to make a certain point here, when it came to that particular plant, there were 4 counties that they were looking at, and 2 of the counties in Iowa and 2 in Illinois. The 2 in Illinois did not qualify for federal funds based on the fact that they didn't have emergency situations. And so what we essentially did in this case, and I think the governor should be under pressure for this, not necessarily because he's a bad guy, but because we're talking about $1 billion operation that was already getting $300 million from the federal government due to the fact that these are the only counties that were eligible for that money, so they're very well likely going to get it. And we're also going to give this company another 316 or 17 on top of that. So we end up subsidizing over half of what it's going to take probably to put this place in operation. And at this rate, it'll cost us literally trillions of dollars for Governor Branstad to meet his goal of job creation. Unfortunately, we can't afford that. And I think the tax structure as a whole is one thing to say, but this particular issue, I really think that the state could do better.
Thank you. And this will be the final question. You mentioned year-round school a bit earlier, and then earlier in this legislative session, there was some discussion of when school should start. And so, in simple terms, what is the best school year and why?
Sure. Well, obviously, we're going to keep seeing improvements in the way things are done in schools all around the world, and we're going to take those ideas that we can and move them into our state. But we've been kind of slow to do that. The best school year is one that provides the best education. Simple as that. I know that the facts prove, as I said, that year-round school tends to be a lot better for kids when it comes to retaining information, when it comes to getting them prepared for college and to be an adult that actually remembers what they learned even in 3rd or 4th grade. So I think that the best school year is going to be a combination of things. Maybe one size fits all isn't going to work for everyone, but I think the majority of counties and the majority of districts can benefit from a year-round school. And I think the facts will support that. I think that we can do, the school year could start any time as long as it essentially never ends, because kids will keep learning if they keep being taught to. We know that.
Well, there's been lots of lively debate on this in the last 2 years. We start talking about school start date. Gets interesting for me. The individual state representative that I live with is from Okoboji. So he would obviously like to see the school start date move back because there's a lot of lost tourism dollars in the state of Iowa because of an early school start date. I respect that. The other argument is, you know, and I've been kind of an advocate for home rule, for local control. And so, you know, we have some debates on that. Although I will tell you, from a personal experience this summer, my daughter, over the course, I think this is like the 5th or 6th year that she does an educational presentation for 4-H. And, you know, she's pretty good at it. She's qualified every year. And so we go down to Des Moines to the state fair for her to do her educational presentation, and half the kids that were scheduled to give their educational presentation that day were no-shows. Why? Because they started school. You know, so I guess we got to kind of weigh that out. I'll be honest with you, I think that my daughter learned more about doing the public speaking, about being in front of people, and doing an educational presentation on stem cell donations than she probably did putting her book cover on that day, okay? So there is an argument on both sides of this, and I think this is one of the things that, that we've kind of put into what I'm calling this educational task force, where we need to look at this. You know, is this something that the state needs to get involved on? Personally, I hate to mandate down to the school districts what you're going to do or what you're not going to do, but you know, there's arguments on both sides of this. They're valid arguments. I actually was not on board with my roommate this last legislative session on this, and it came back to the fact that you know, the year prior to that I ran a bill on home rule for school districts, and I'm like, well, I'd be going against what I stood for on that. So, but it does. It really warrants a conversation. You know, the whole year-round school concept, I mean, there's some validity with that as well. You know, we have some obstacles that we'd have to overcome on that. We got to get teachers on board if you're going to start to do something like that. You know, you start talking about family vacations, and you can't tell me. I mean, I know for a fact there's people in this crowd, and I can point to one of them, that's done a wonderful job of taking his children all over the world and showing them the world. That's an educational experience. And that's because he had the time in the summertime to do those things. So there's a lot of arguments on both sides of the table on this.
Then now it's time for closing statements, 2 minutes, and we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I guess ultimately, the reason I'm running for state rep is because I see a lack of enthusiasm in Des Moines for getting back to the pre-cut funding levels, figuring out how we're going to do that. Because I think, as I said, there are a lot of government services that, you know, provide good jobs to good people and make our communities stronger, and provide the kinds of services that make us a real, you know, society leading toward the future. So I think that good is never good enough. We always need to keep striving to do better no matter how well we're doing, and we need to make our education system among the top 5, in my opinion. Should be no questions asked. We should be there, and since we're not there, we're doing something wrong. We need to continue to improve, though, even beyond that, because, as I've said, we're in a global world now, or a global marketplace. The world is intertwined to the point where we need to be more than just a great state. We need to be the greatest state we possibly can be. We need to be an example. We need to provide the goods and services that the world can actually rely on and consume for the next 20 years. It's going to take I think, some new direction in the State House to do that. There are a lot of good people with a lot of good ideas down there now, but we're just not getting to where we should be, and I'm willing to stand up for a couple of things like making schools actually able to provide new opportunities, looking forward to the future in a lot of ways like that, I'm not sure are going to happen if we don't have a change in leadership. And that's why I want to be there. I would love to represent everyone in this room, not just because that many of you are friends or acquaintances, but because I truly care about the future of what our kids are going to be and what we're going to be in 5 or 10 years. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thanks again to all the folks that helped put this on, and everyone for being here. It's been just an excellent night. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Well, again, just want to thank everybody for coming out. This is an awesome turnout. I really appreciate the folks coming out here, appreciate the questions. You know, I guess I can honestly say, and for those of you that truly know me out there, and when we hear about the rationale for why maybe he wants to run is for a lack of enthusiasm, I think all of you out there that truly know me, you know I don't have a lack of enthusiasm. Absolutely does not happen. I have a hard time sitting still up here. You know, and I think one of the best things that I truly bring to this position is over the course of the last 2 years, it's the relationships that you establish. You know, I can go down to Des Moines this next legislative session. I don't have to relearn meeting people. I don't have to make those acquaintances. You've learned the system. It truly does take a couple years to learn the system. It takes a couple years for people to start to listen to you, for people to start to respect your opinions. And I truly feel like now we will hit this next General Assembly, the 85th General Assembly, we'll hit the ground running, you know? And I got a lot of ideas. I got, you know, a lot of information that I've gathered from constituents. I just truly feel that, you know, we're going to go down here to this next General Assembly and we can get some things done. You know, my first year, I'll be honest, nobody really hands off a lot of things to you because you're a freshman legislator. They kind of bounce you around a little bit, and you got to learn the ropes. I can tell you this, if you call any legislator in the State House in Des Moines and ask them if I have a lack of enthusiasm, they will completely disagree with you. The other thing that I've done a good job of, I feel, is working with everyone. You know, regardless of your party sitting out here tonight, I represent all of you. And I treat you all with the same respect, regardless of whether or not you put up my yard sign or my opponent's. Thank you.